of a history of the Portuguese in Kings County. This third presentation was based upon the economic and off-the-farm businesses that became part of the local economy in Kings County over the last 100 years. And so what we did was we tried to look at what first came to the county in terms of Portuguese businesses, and we put together this map of Hanford. This map shows different locations of Portuguese-owned businesses in Kings County in 1913, and you can see all the different businesses that we had pictures of, including dairy creameries that existed in Hanford 110 years ago. And it's an interesting layout of the different types of businesses that had initially started in Kings County that were partially agriculturally connected, but in some respects were not. For example, we have the Portuguese newspaper, O Lavrador Português, which was one of the first Portuguese language newspapers in the United States. We also have a gas station that was owned by the Casimiro family, and you also had a bar, and there's a couple over here. We have a livery stable that was owned by Manuel Mancibo, and Manuel Alvarez, and just different businesses that were here in Kings County. And so it was a great way of being able to show people just how far back Portuguese economic interest happened in Kings County off the farm.
So we've talked about the Portuguese and the Azoreans and what an impact they had on California agriculture. They were naturals when it came to farming and the dairy industry, and this family is a perfect example. This couple came to Kings County in the late 1800s, and he went to work on a dairy farm and eventually was able to buy his own small dairy outside of Layton. He paid for his 40 acres on Laguna Avenue with a $10 gold piece. And that's where the family operation of the Neves family started. Today, they're all over Kings County. They no longer have a dairy farm, which is also kind of typical in today's Kings County Portuguese community. Most Portuguese have sold their dairy farms like this family, but today the 5th generation of Neves, they are farming pistachios and walnuts and other crops in the county. And it all started on Laguna Avenue with a $10 gold piece.
One of the businesses that we selected to have an exhibit on is the local Portuguese bakery, which is up on 10th and Grainsville. And so what we did was we have pictures of the owners here and a little story about how they started their bakery. And throughout the exhibit, they would come every week and stock this exhibit with bread. And at the end of the week, whoever was working in the exhibit got the bread. And so this is here. This is a vacant spot for that. Up here, is an exhibit of the making of butter within Kings County. Again, the dairy industry was a very important aspect to the local economy. In 1960, 90% of all the dairies owned in California were owned by people of Portuguese descent. And so what you're seeing here is an example of the cream of the crop, so to speak, the butter that was manufactured here locally within creameries. And we have different views of the creamery in operation and a story that tells everything here about the making of the butter, how it's churned, how the cream is weighed, how it's cut up and put into boxes. And it's just was a part of the economy that still exists today, but at a different level. One of the individuals that we decided to have display upon is a gentleman who has remained relatively quiet throughout his career. His name is George Soares. George Soares is a senior partner within the firm of Soares & Conway here in Hanford and in Sacramento. And we decided to discuss a little bit about his family's history and how he came into the area. His father was born in Corcoran, and they settled ultimately in Harmony, where George Soares was born in 1944. He attended Hanford High School, graduated in 1962, got his law degree, and went on to establish one of the premier law firms in California. George is a well-known legislature lobbyist within the state of California halls, and is a very interesting man to talk to, and we're very happy to have a little story about him. In fact, you did something about him, right?
Right, I did. So as a part of preparing this exhibit about George Soares, we did a little research online to find out more about his Portuguese ancestry because he did not know a lot about it. So George was born to the son of Azorean immigrants, his father, and his mother was actually from a family of Swiss-Italian immigrants. And we began researching George's family tree, and it ended up being very interesting to find out where his family came from on the islands. That's something unique to the Portuguese when researching ancestry. The Portuguese were meticulous about record keeping, and when a child was born, when a couple was married, when someone died, you did not report to the city or to the government, you reported directly to your parish church, and the priests were responsible to document everything. And realizing the significance of that, the government of the Azores years ago made all of those records available online. So it was very easy for me to find records about George's family, and most of it was information he had never heard before. We even found photos online that members of his family had never seen before.
As part of the history of the Portuguese in Kings County, we decided that we needed to include one of its most famous residents, a gentleman by the name of Steve Perry. For those of you who don't know who he is, Steve Perry was the lead singer for the group Journey, and they've been a world famous rock and roll band since the early 70s. What our exhibit decided to do was we decided to talk about Steve Perry's existence in music before he became big, in terms of the local scene that he sang with, the groups that he sang with. We were able to get pictures, and we were able to get some stories about him, and we put together an exhibit of him here before he became big and famous. One of the groups, the Steve Perry Legacy Group, was very excited about this, and they provided us with a lot of information regarding Steve Perry and his career, and so we're very happy to have this exhibit with him, and we've got a little bit of his albums, and of course the famous one everybody points is the one that takes KNGS country western station, put it on the front of an album, and that was pretty interesting. So what about you got, Kathy?
Well, I did a little research on Steve Perry, and what I thought was quite interesting is that he apparently comes to music very naturally. In 1936, his father entered a talent show that was being held at the Hanford Fox Theater, and he won first place. And for a prize, he was sent to the California State Fair, where he was invited to sing publicly. So music was important in that family, and when Steve Perry was a young man, his mother gifted him with a pendant, a music symbol. And I guess from what I've read about him, he wears it all of the time. But we found lots and lots of newspaper articles about Steve Perry when he was growing up here. He had a couple of early bands. We got some great photos of those that we were able to find in the high school yearbooks and also online. And I found a newspaper clipping when Steve Perry was still in high school. His little band was performing at a local homecoming high school dance. And the cost of admission, if you had a student body card to attend this dance, was 25 cents. So I just thought that was quite unique that at one time you could go see Steve Perry perform live for 25 cents. But we have been delighted to learn about him, not only through our own research with the Hanford Sentinel and speaking to local people that grew up with him, but the Steve Perry Legacy Group has shared great information with us, and they've loaned us some of the items that we have here. And he is definitely a local boy, made good, and we're very proud to include him here. Oh, and his mother was actually Azorean born and immigrated to the United States, I believe, when she was 5 years old. Her name was Maria, which is a big surprise. And his father was born to Azorean immigrants, so he has direct ties to the Azores, and we're very proud to have him represented here in our Exhibit 3. So although we wanted to focus on his life in Hanford, we did include some newspaper clippings about his success story after he made it big in the music industry, because he came back to Hanford a few times, and in one case he was interviewed here for an article in the Hanford Sentinel, and we also have some articles about his success from the Fresno Bee, but he did continue to give back. In the early 80s, at one point, he came and did play for a Hanford High School prom, which, can you even imagine Steve Perry being at your prom? But also he has donated locally to some Valley charities, including Valley Children's Hospital. So even though he left Hanford long ago and hasn't lived here in decades, this is his home, and he hasn't forgotten that he's from Hanford. And the women of the Steve Perry Legacy Group have made it obvious that he has touched lots of lives with his music. So one of the things that we decided to include here was guests of this exhibit were able to write down their memories of knowing Steve Perry when he grew up in Hanford, or how his music has influenced their life. And they were able to write these things down and put them here in this box. And we've had some very, very interesting stories come through here that eventually, I believe, we are going to mail to Mr. Perry himself. So we're very proud of this Azorean, and very proud that his roots are from Hanford.
All right.
Part of Kings County's economic success was through the dairy industry. And we were very fortunate that a local resident, a gentleman by the name of Chris Camara, and his wife Lori, allowed us to borrow for this exhibit most of the signage that you see in this exhibit here, in terms of the different creameries and products that were being made within Kings County. And he also was very generous in allowing us to have a display of the different types of milk bottles and milk creameries that existed within Kings County here. And this is just a fraction of the collection that he had. And we were very thankful that he was allowing us to do this, because it really allowed our exhibit to demonstrate the importance that dairy was and still is in Kings County. There were many different businesses that we had an opportunity to select, and we decided upon picking on those industries that were still related within the dairy industry itself. The first one that came to mind is a local industry that we've all heard before. It's called BECO. It used to be Brown Equipment Company. Originally it was started off as Brown's Livestock Supply, And we were very happy that the Brown family was able to share with us pictures of their operation from the beginning to current. And so we have a description here showing the different generations of the family that exist in terms of the lifeline of Brown's livestock supply into Brown Equipment Company, and how BECO has become a world leader in the development of large dairy operations throughout the world. And there are different examples of pictures of different dairy operations that they have built, and a little story regarding the original patriarch of the family, Mr. Mike Brown. So we're very happy that we were happy to have that. Another family that has become quite local in terms of their fame is the Rosa Brothers. We all know Rosa Brother Milk Company. We've seen their glass bottles and their dairy products being sold all throughout local stores and grocery stores throughout the area. But not too many people know that the Rosa family originally came to California in the 1860s. And so we have a complete lineup of all the original ancestors of the Rosa family, and when they came into Northern California and then came into Kings County, and pictures of all the different family members. The founder of Rosa Brothers Dairy, Manuel Rosa, his high school picture, his military picture, his wedding photo, him out on the dairy, him working in the barn, him with his family, and the next generation coming through with Noel and Roland Rosa. They have built up a fabulous little dairy operation that is becoming very well known in the valley for selling high quality milk products and ice cream, and you can't get enough of it when you get it. So, we also have a couple panoramic photos of different dairy operations that were here in the valley. We have the Macedo Dairy, and we also have the Martin Dairy. It was at the time that these photos were being taken, there were photographers that traveled throughout the valley to encourage farm owners to stand in front of their empire with all the best assets that they had with their cattle and take a lasting photo of the legacy that they have. And there are so many of these photos that I have seen throughout my lifetime that are just fabulous. We even have one for our dairy that existed in Burrell. And so these are just wonderful examples of a snapshot of how proud these people were that came here with nothing and ended up building up their small little empire. The other part of this exhibit was something that came out of my own collection. I had been asking Portuguese families throughout this entire exhibit for the last year, hey, do you have any photos of what your life was like on the dairy farm or anything like that? And they all kept saying the same thing. They all kept saying, oh, we were too busy to take pictures, that was too much money, it was not something we were gonna do. Not realizing that my grandmother, Julia Seamus, had a Brownie camera, and she took photos of everything that went on the dairy farm that we had out on the corner of 6th and Flint from 1950 through the 1970s. And so we have pictures here of moments of my family's life on the dairy. And so there's my dad, my uncles, my aunts, my grandfather, my grandmother. Some great, just one picture in particular I love is picture number 9, showing the day in which the brand new Dodge pickup came home from the dealership, and the family swarming it like a bunch of ants because they were so happy to get a brand new truck on the ranch. And just my uncle, who is standing there he's 93 now, and he told me the story about when that truck came home on that day and how everybody was so excited that they had a brand new truck for the ranch. And of course, another one is right below that. My grandmother took a picture of the laundry. It was just the way she was. She would take something, she had an artistic expression or an innate ability to pick up art, and just taking pictures of the laundry, what most people would find embarrassing, she thought that was a neat moment in life. So over here we have different farms, different aspects of farming, different pictures of different farming operations that we have. Just want to point out this special chair. This is what dairymen used to wear around their waist so that they didn't have to carry a milk stool out to milk the cows. And so that would be strapped to them and they would sit down on that post. And there's a picture there, picture number 6. You can't really see it too well, but that's my dad with that seat strapped to his behind. And one thing to note was alfalfa was the first irrigated crop within California. And before Kings County became Kings County, it was part of Tulare County. And one of the first names that was mentioned that should become the name of the new county was not Kings, but was to be called Lucerne. Lucerne was a variety of alfalfa that was grown in the area, and that was one of the original names that was mentioned for the name Kings County. My dad's name was Joe Seamus, and so all the time people asked me, is your dad named after the school that's up there on East or West Hanford? And I go, no, different Joe Seamus, different family. In fact, Joe Seamus, the school administrator, and I had already gone through the family tree and discovered that we were not related, at least initially. There might be somewhere up the tree where we are. And so we have a little display about Joe Seamus and the footprint that he left on local education. He was a very forward-thinking administrator, and he did a lot for local education. He was also an avid baseball coach, and my brother-in-law was a little boy and was coached by Joe Seamus and still spoke highly of him even to this day. And we were very happy that we had a little display upon him on his presence within Kings County. We have a more recent addition to the local education is Victor Rosa. Victor Rosa is a greenhorn. He came to the United States in the 70s and ended up becoming quite successful in the world of education. He's now the superintendent at Hanford High School, and we're very happy to discuss his life and what he's brought to Kings County for the level of education excellence that exists here in our area.
So we're featuring here Raven's Deli in Armona. Raven's Deli is owned and operated by Bill and Marlene Raven. Marlene is a Portuguese woman who grew up in Riverdale. She was born to first generation born Azoreans in Riverdale. And this is a perfect example of how smart and hardworking the Portuguese were. Marlene and Bill married in the 60s, and an opportunity came up for them to purchase the Armona Meat Locker. So once they opened the meat locker and began operating, they decided to start expanding a little, and they began making their own linguiça that Marlene had a recipe from her Azorean family. That became very successful, and it inspired them. And the building next to their meat locker became available for purchase, so they purchased that. So as their business expanded, they began serving lunches at their delicatessen. They are famous for their tri-tip sandwiches. And then they started making jerky. At first they had 3 flavors, and now I believe Marlene said they have about 20 different varieties of beef jerky. It's not uncommon to see someone post on Facebook that they were in Hanford in Kings County for the weekend, and no trip to Kings County is complete without getting a tri-tip sandwich over at Raven's Deli. But this is exactly how Portuguese people found so much success here. They would find an opportunity and take it. And as they worked hard with that opportunity and other little opportunities became available, they were smart enough to give it a try. And this is a perfect success story of that. Bill and Marlene started with a meat locker and ended up with quite a business that still exists today in Armona. So we're back to the entertainment industry here, and we're featuring Janice Noga as another important Hanford citizen who is involved in the entertainment industry. Janice is a twin. She has a twin sister named Joyce, and they both loved to sing and perform. So growing up, they were known pretty famous locally as the Noga twins and performed at a lot of different events here in Kings County. And as the girls grew up, Janice became more and more involved in music and in drama. She was the first female cast in a lead role at Roger Rocca's Good Company Players when it opened in Fresno. And her husband wrote a screenplay about someone who had lived in a concentration camp during World War II, and they took that off Broadway, and Janice was the lead role in that performance as well on the East Coast. So the problem that we had with Exhibit 3, when we talked about introducing a few people of Portuguese ancestry who live or work or otherwise impact Kings County even today, was how in the world do we narrow it down? There are so many important people that we would have loved to have featured, and we just ran out of room and ran out of time. But we do have a few here, and we just feel it's important to mention that David Valadeo, our own locally grown homemade kid, grew up and is now representing this district in Congress. And Lily Pimentel, who grew up to Azorians on a dairy. She, like all Portuguese children did on dairies, had to do her fair share of work there on the dairy farm. And that inspired her to go into education, and she's an ag teacher and an FFA advisor here in Hanford for the Hanford High School District. And today she also is a 4-H leader and teaches 4-H. So these are just some of our citizens today that we felt it was important to include.
One of the fortunate aspects of our exhibit was the fact that we were able to acquire the work of Scott and Adrian Serpa Alston, who tirelessly went through the local community more than 40 years ago to document the early history of the Portuguese families that came here and got to speak with the actual people who came here while they were still alive. And so we have here, as part of our exhibit, some of the photos that they had captured at the time that they visited people 40 some years ago. And we just have examples of the photos that they were able to copy from the family's albums and photos that were taken more than 100 years ago. This picture here is from Chris and Lori Camara. This was the family dairy farm between Corcoran and Joaquina. And I can't imagine living out there today. And this was considered a wonderful place to live, considering where they had come from before. So it just goes to show you just how determined people were that they were going to be a success, whether they liked it or not.
So as we come to the end of this year-long exhibit, Retalhos, a Portuguese history of Kings County, we end up right here where I can't help but think back to our opening reception in January of this year, 2023, when we began working on this exhibit. We really had no idea how it would be received by the community. And the feeling at that opening reception was magic, and we knew then that we were onto something wonderful. We had no idea what kind of an incredible year it would be, and what great people we would meet, what great things we would learn, what lovely treasures we would get to hold that belong to people. But one of the most cherished parts of this entire exhibit all year long has been something that actually just exists because of an accident. So we wanted to show people where the Azores are. Lots of people don't know. And so we put these maps up so that people could see the Azores here in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean in relation to Europe and Portugal, and over here, the east coast of the United States and Canada. And this was just to give people an idea where they were. Here are the 9 islands. Well, at the opening reception, people really started to get excited when they saw these maps of the islands, and they wanted to tell us all where their family was from. And this became such an integral part of our exhibit that we just decided to leave it up for the entire year. And as you can see, our guests that have come to the Azores, to the exhibit, have come and placed pins here on the map in the villages where their family came from. And this has been such an honor, and it has been a real joy to see where people come from and to hear their stories. And real thankful to all of you for everything you did to make this year a success. And we hope that our presentation of the Portuguese history of Kings County has inspired you. We hope you've learned something. I know that we have. And from the bottom of my heart, I just thank you profoundly.
I would say that the one thing that I've learned about this exhibit over the last year was just how powerful the Portuguese people were, and they didn't care. They just did their thing. They worked hard, they raised their families, they went to church, they started their own businesses, and the economic and political power that they generated from that was secondary in their mind in relationship to how well they could raise their families and maintain and increase their family's lifestyle. I grew up in the middle of this my entire life, and I never truly realized the expanse of the Portuguese influence on Kings County until dealing with this exhibit for the entire year, and realizing that this area would be completely different if it wasn't for the fact that the Portuguese came here 120, 130 years ago and carved out of the raw land empires that still exist today.
And as much as we have talked about these important people who left everything behind to come and start a new life here in the United States, we talked about their contributions to society and the incredible history that we wanted to showcase about them. In doing so, in the past year, the Carnegie Museum has made history itself, and we're very, very proud to have been a part of it, and we thank the Portuguese community and all who have embraced our exhibits for coming through and making this year a big success.